So we'll begin, and obviously, I'm sure we'll be joined by people throughout the presentation. We do have an overflow room, so perhaps that will fill up as well. But also, this is being broadcast live on Southfield Cable 15 to give the whole community an opportunity to see the presentation that we have here today. So I appreciate you attending. For those of you who came last Wednesday night and were turned away, we apologize. And we had some quick acting people who helped to plan this event. So in particular, I want to thank all of the presenters here tonight for their flexibility in terms of being able to come on Monday night with short notice, and both the staff of our Southfield Public Library for hosting the event on Wednesday and quickly offering to host it again on Monday. Now they have staff at the library directing people here because we wanted to move it to a bigger venue than the auditorium with the option for an overflow crowd. So I want to thank the staff here at Southfield City Hall for making that possible as well. So I'm State Representative Jeremy Moss. I have the pleasure of representing the city of Southfield in the Michigan House of Representatives. I previously served here on the Southfield City Council, and I also represent the communities of Lathrop Village, Beverly Hills, Bingham Farms, Franklin, and the rest of Southfield Township. So obviously there's a lot of heightened awareness to a permit that's been applied for at the corner of 9 Mile and Evergreen Road. This presentation is going to address some of those particulars, and I wanted to at least go over the agenda that we're going to have here this evening. So I'll be introducing some folks in the audience here tonight first, and then we are going to get an update from the City of Southfield from our mayor, Kenson Siver. I'll give a legislative update of some of the things that are going on in particular to oil and gas drilling in Lansing. Then we'll have the presentation from our Oakland County Water Resources Commissioner, Jim Nash, and we'll set aside time for questions and answers. So the best way that we felt the question and answer process could go, and it was very successful at our town hall on Wednesday, is you should have received a card or picked up a card at the front table. If not, we'll be able to pass out cards throughout the presentation. We ask that you just fill out your name, where you're from. I'm not going to read your address in front of everybody, and then write down your question. And then I'm going to give you the opportunity to expand upon your question if you so wish. So if John Smith writes a question, I'm going to identify John Smith and his question. And if John Smith wants to raise his hand to expand upon it, we're going to give you the opportunity to state your question in your own words. But rather than having all of these hands and then a little bit of disorganization, we thought that that was the best way to do questions and answers. So the cards are out in the front. If you need an additional card throughout the presentation, my staff will be walking around here and we'll make sure that we have those, and then they'll be collecting them throughout the presentation. So with a few introductions, I wanted to introduce our city officials that are here this evening. Councilman Lloyd Cruz is in attendance here today. He's in the back there. Councilman Daniel Brightwell, also in the back. And Councilwoman Joan Seymour, all from the city of Southfield. She was here earlier. Of course, I want to introduce our mayor, Ken Siver, who will come up in just a brief moment, and some of our city staff who has been kind of dealing with this issue since it first came about, including our city administrator, Fred Zorn, our city planning director, Terry Crode, who's in the back there, who should be able to answer some questions on the technical end if I can't, and our city attorney, Sue Ward, who's here. And at this moment, I also want to bring up Christine Jensen, who is the district director for our Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence. She has a statement from Congresswoman Lawrence, who's been on top of this issue. Unfortunately, Congresswoman Lawrence is in Washington this evening preparing for a vote, so I wanted to give the opportunity to Chris to give remarks on the Congresswoman's behalf.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Jeremy. I just have a brief statement from the Congresswoman to deliver to you all. You know how Southfield's close to her heart. Good evening, everyone. First, I want to thank our State Representative Jeremy Moss for making sure our community is educated on this important issue and congratulate him on hosting these town halls. Also, I'd like to thank our Oakland County Water Resource Commissioner Jim Nash for being proactive and making certain that the water we drink in Oakland County is safe. I wish that I could be with you tonight. However, I am back in Washington preparing for my committee hearing on Wednesday on the frightening situation in Flint. I applaud all of you in this room for coming out and getting informed on this important issue that is of imminent concern right here in Southfield. Hydraulic oil and gas drilling or fracking is going to be explained to you this evening in great detail. Please take this information to your friends and neighbors and share it in your community so everyone can gain an understanding of exactly what the risks are with this process and make an informed decision about whether we want this happening in Southfield or anywhere in the 14th District. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel strongly that any amount of risk to one of our most precious resources is too much risk. The potential for irreparable harm, even if very slight, is too high for my constituents in Southfield and too high for any of my constituents in the 14th District. We only have to look to our friends to the north in Flint and see what long-term devastating impacts on an entire generation can happen as an unintended consequence of an ill-conceived and improperly vetted financial decision. Again, I applaud all of you for being proactive and being informed about what is happening in our community, and I stand ready to be shoulder to shoulder with State Representative Moss, Water Resources Commissioner Nash, all of our City Council, Mayor Siver, and all of your elected officials in making sure that the residents of Southfield remain safe and secured. Your Congresswoman, Brenda Lawrence.
I appreciate that statement from our Congresswoman. I want to make an additional note. It just so happens, for whatever reason, the Southfield District is District 35. That's the number. The district for the city of Flint is District 34. So for this past year, I've been serving right side by side with my colleague, State Representative Sheldon Neely. Our offices are literally next door to one another. He just called me earlier today to say that he's making his way down to this town hall this evening, standing in solidarity with the city of Southfield. So we'll welcome him when he eventually makes it into this room. So I also wanted to give kind of an overview about how this particular town hall came about. I think there were some questions at our last town hall about what's the expectations for tonight. So I first heard about this permit in particular in October, and I hold a monthly coffee hour at the Southfield Library every month, and by November's coffee hour, some of the residents, including some in this room, brought this up to me as a concern of theirs and wanted to learn more about it. We extended the invitation to our Water Resources Commissioner, Jim Nash, to address our constituents here specifically on what to expect should this permit go forward at one of my coffee hours. Unfortunately, the date didn't work out, so that's why we had it on January 27th. We had this town hall. We reserved a space in the library which seats about 150, and I was overwhelmed that about 400 people showed up to that town hall, including many of the people in this room. So we quickly maneuvered to hold a secondary event. So I want to be very clear that this is a presentation on oil and gas drilling and its impact on the environment and our water resources. So what this is and what this isn't. This is it's a drilling permit that's first of its kind in our community. So I wanted to be sure that if this permit is going forward, what should we expect as residents as consequences to this permit? So some people had questions at our last town hall for the church or for Jordan Development, but this is not a debate here tonight about the merits of the permit. Questions for the church or the drilling company or the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality can be answered on February 17th at the public hearing. Our mayor will be announcing more about that when he comes up in just a second. I understand that there will be a presentation there about the merits of their permit moving forward. So in full disclaimer, and I want to be clear, I am against this permit, and for the reasons that you will see outlined in this presentation. This presentation is based on unbiased scientific fact. So if you're part of the group that wants to speak against this at the public hearing, you are totally in your right to do that. If you want to speak in favor of this permit, if you find that the presentation here tonight does not outweigh the benefits for this permit, it's your right to speak to that at the public hearing. And if you want to inquire more about the science behind this presentation, that's what we're here for tonight. Challenge the Water Resources Commission Commissioner. He has the answers to most of your questions. He's the top county official when it's issues relating to our water resources. And that's why we wanted to have him here in our community. So this is not a presentation of the pros and cons of this particular permit. This is not a debate on the current permit. That, again, will be held on February 17th. This is a what to expect if this permit or any permit in the future starts to happen and is approved by the MDQ here in Southfield. So I just wanted to lay that out on the front end of things. And also I wanted to give the mayor an opportunity to speak on behalf of the city and the city council about what he has experienced over the last several weeks regarding this particular permit application and the city's response to it. So I would like to welcome Mayor Kenzen Siver.
Good evening, everyone. It's been a very interesting couple of months. When this all started, we had heard that actually sometime back that Jordan Development had come to Southfield and done seismic tests. And then we didn't hear anything, but they did seismic tests, obviously, at Word of Faith property. I know they were next door at the Thompson Farmhouse. And so proactively, our city planner came to council and said, I'd like to put a moratorium. We don't have an ordinance about drilling. We've never had drilling. So and I applaud our city planner for bringing this forward and saying, I want to put a moratorium in place. And that was last year. And as you know, the council this fall renewed that moratorium, and it expires now on April 28th. In the meantime, word started to filter out in the community about the drilling permit that had been applied, and we officially received word of it, although we kind of knew it was coming. We heard officially that in November that a permit had been applied for. And then the call started coming to me as mayor and to council members and the city administration, and you've got to do something about this. Well, as all of you should know, the city is opposed, my office, the council, the administration, we are all opposed to drilling in a residential area. As your mayor, and as I share this responsibility with the city council and our administration, your health and all of our welfare is our first priority. And we find drilling, especially in a community that still has people getting water out of the ground. Not everybody is on Detroit Water in this community. But even if everybody were, we just find drilling in a residential area incompatible with community life. I want to make it very clear that we are not against drilling in an appropriate place. I mean, drilling has gone on for over 100 years in this country. We drive cars, we heat our homes, all of that. It's not about drilling that we're opposed to. We're not against Word of Faith Church or any church, and we're certainly not against the parishioners of this particular church. What we are against, again, is we are against drilling in a residential area. That's it. And I don't want to make this a fight against the church, but they've made the powers that be in that church have made a decision, and we feel we have a totally different take on that decision. And so and again, I have to give kudos to Jeremy, who wrote to the DEQ and contacted them and asked for a public hearing. Now, they do hundreds of permits a year, and they don't really, I don't think it's normal procedure for them to do to grant a public hearing. Jeremy took it one step further and went to the governor's office and said, look, you've already got a mess in Flint. Are you going to possibly pollute another community? And I don't care how much Jordan Development says they have an excellent track record. It only takes once for something to happen. Further, I don't know if you read the Free Press, but I mean, what a telling front page. Last Friday, on the top is the Flint water, the latest thing that the state workers have bottled water way before the residents of Flint. Then below it is Mayor Duggan, and again, this is a DEQ deal, allowing Marathon to put more pollutants in the air in southwest Detroit, which we already know is well polluted. So what? We're next. So I've had a number of conversations with the DEQ, and they called maybe 10 days ago and said, could we do a public hearing in Southfield? And this followed Jeremy's call to the governor's office. So that, I said, absolutely, and we'll host it. They wanted to know, well, where could we have it? I said, we'll have it here at City Hall. Well, we don't have enough room here. So on Friday, I called the DEQ back, especially after what happened last Wednesday night. The community has become aware of this, so we are moving, or this hearing now has been moved to Southfield High Auditorium, which we can accommodate a good 1,000 people there. Now, I want to urge you, I know it's another night out, but I want to urge you to attend that hearing. This is the hearing where you get to talk directly to the DEQ. And why that's important is, again, routinely they approve these permits. I think there's a handful that have been denied. And I don't know where they all are, but certainly we do not want this permit granted in Southfield. So this is your time. The format of that town hall meeting will basically be, they'll make a presentation, and then they've told me they will give everybody 3 minutes to speak. I would, really the issue for us, again, is drilling in a residential area. And I would, think about what you're going to say if you choose to speak at that hearing, but it's really, again, about removal of trees, 1.5 acres. It's about heavy equipment on our roads. It's about the possible or the possibility of environmental damage and contamination of our water table in Southfield. And most areas, by the way, in Southfield have very high water table. We have a lot of people, as you know, with sump pumps in this community. So the other thing I want to add is that we've been very curious because we've read in the media that the DEQ has 1,500 people favoring this drilling permit in Southfield. And, that struck me as curious. I will tell you honestly, I have heard from scores of people in this community about no drilling. Every single day I get emails or messages. I have had one email that said, I support drilling at 9 Mile and Evergreen, and I support it because it's good for families, the writer said. Anyhow, last Friday, because of my curiosity, I sent a message to the DEQ, and I said, please share who is in favor. Where are all these people coming from that are in favor of drilling? As your mayor, maybe I'm out of touch with what I think the community is telling me. So I asked for this. And I got a very quick response from the DEQ, and that was, if you want to know, send us a Freedom of Information Act request. So today, our city attorney, we sent the FOIA request. Now, how quickly they answer that, if you know anything about Freedom of Information Act, you have 5 days to respond. However, you can ask for a 10-day business day extension, which would possibly take us past the 17th of February. Nonetheless, we are prepared to pay for the FOIA and go through it. So once again, please tell, there are a lot of people that were here last week or not here tonight. Please tell everybody you know, help us spread the word. We want you at Southfield High Auditorium, 6 o'clock on February 17th, and let your voice be heard, because these are the people, the DEQ, this is the organization or the agency that's going to make this decision. We are, and we hope to prevail. Our city attorney, who I think is next.
Well,
okay.
Questions as they
All right. Sue, stand up and let people know who you are. We are prepared to take this to court if the permit is granted. You know, it's a shame that we would have to spend money on an environmental attorney and our legal staff, but this is an issue that's too important for this community that we've got to stand up. So that's the next step after the 17th. So again, I thank you all for being here. I'll turn the program back over to Jeremy.
So, as the mayor said, you know, this is a first of its kind issue here in the city of Southfield. So we're trying to provide some solutions here, to be very proactive on this, to figure out, you know, what can the city's response be. I'm trying to figure out from my office, what can the state's response be to something like this happening in our community. So I have last week introduced legislation that would specifically address this situation from happening in the future. I introduced House Bill 5258. It was referred to the Committee on Energy Policy, and what this specific House bill does is it amends the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, which issues the oil and gas drilling permits in the state of Michigan. It does three things. It would specifically not allow a permit to be granted in a county of a population of 750,000 people or more unless the following conditions are met. And 750,000, those are our most populous counties. That's Oakland, Wayne, and Macomb. And in those particular counties, these three things must be met in order for a permit to proceed forward. Number one, the proposed well must be located 2,000 feet from any residential building, period. Number two, the location and operation of the proposed well must be in compliance with applicable local ordinances. And for me, that's the crux of this issue here in the city of Southfield. We have a lawful city moratorium that prevents any oil and gas permit from being issued in the city of Southfield while we figure out with our council, our mayor, our attorney, and our planning director, how do we want to zone this in our community? We've not faced this issue before. So this moratorium is not being lawfully respected by the state agency. They don't have to adhere to any local ordinance while issuing a permit. I'm introducing a House bill that would require the DEQ to follow all applicable local ordinances. And number three, thank you. And number three, the MDEQ must hold a public hearing in the city, village, or township in which the proposed well is located and considered public input from the public hearing. Now, that's not part of the current protocol. As the mayor said, I've been very loud in my request to hold a public hearing and not have any decisions be issued without public input from our community. And as such, they have granted my request, and that's the meeting that is going to take place on February the 17th. So this House bill was referred to the Committee on Energy Policy last week. The chairman of that committee is Representative Eric Nesbitt. His number is available, his office number is available for your thoughts on this legislation. It's available right here, 517-373-0839. That's now he can determine whether or not to bring this bill up for a hearing and for a vote. Next, I wanted to review some upcoming dates before we dive into Commissioner Nash's presentation. I am hosting with my colleagues from Oakland County a water town hall on Saturday, February 6th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. in the Royal Oak Senior Center, along with my colleagues Representative Jim Townsend from Royal Oak, Christine Gregg from Farmington Hills, and Robert Wittenberg from Oak Park. We've obviously have a lot of heightened sensitivity to the water quality in this state, given what's going on. And we are fortunate not only to have Commissioner Nash doing a presentation, but we will be joined by Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, who was the one who sounded the early alarm on the issues surrounding Flint. So that is going to be on Saturday, February 6th. That's this Saturday. Just as a reminder, can't plug this enough, the public hearing held by the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality will be Wednesday, February 17th, starting at 6 o'clock. It will be held at a new venue from you might heard before tonight. It is going to be held at the Southfield High School Auditorium, which can hold up to 1,000 people. We know that there is a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of awareness regarding this permit, and we wanted to make sure that everybody was accommodated for. And then lastly, I hold a monthly coffee hour. I have a feeling we're going to outgrow the room that we've been holding it in, but we hold it monthly at the Southfield Public Library. It's a chance for us to catch up on what's been going on in the community and in Lansing over the past month. The next one will be Monday, February 29th at 5:30 at the Southfield Public Library. One final note to mention, there's a water drive that is ongoing for the city of Flint. We had a water drive from my office. I was in Flint all day on Friday with Representative Sheldon Neely. We packed up a Southfield truck. Thanks to the generosity of the people, not only in Southfield, but our surrounding communities and the rest of our House district here. We rented a 15-foot truck and quickly realized we were going to outgrow that truck and had to get a 26-foot truck, thanks to the generosity of those in our community. So we dropped that off on Friday. The city is continuing those efforts, and you can drop off bottled water, jugs of water, or ready-to-feed baby formula that does not need to be mixed with any sort of water. You can drop those off until February 10th at 2 locations in the city. At Southfield City Hall, right at the front desk right here, or if you're closer to the Southfield Human Services location, which is 26080 Berg Road. So without any further ado, I do want to remind you that to fill out the questions as the presentation goes on, we will be collecting them and answering them at the end of the presentation with our County Water Resource Commissioner. But we are going to welcome our County Water Resource Commissioner, Jim Nash, to give a presentation on oil and gas drilling on its impact on our environment.
Well, I appreciate everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. It really means a lot to care enough about your community to really react to this. I think it's terrific. We're going to have a slideshow in a minute. My little controller. Oh. Well, I'm the Water Resource Commissioner. Been in office a little over 3 years now. My first year in office, actually before I came in office when I was campaigning, was when the state announced that they were selling the mineral rights for virtually all state property in the state of Michigan. So I became very active in this, realizing that a lot of these are in Oakland County, around our lakes. Some of our most important lakes are state parks that are now open for drilling. They can't drill on the property. They have to drill off-site and go diagonally. It's a long story about that. Anyway, when I first got involved with this, fracking was the big issue. This is just a very simplistic drawing of what fracking is. The one on the left would be what a fracking operation would be. It goes down 2 or 3 miles deep and then can go 2 or 3 miles horizontally underground. The one on the right is the more standard rig that you would have probably what's going to go on here in Southfield. It's much more into a pocket. It's not nearly as deep. Apparently, they're not going to use any direct heavy fracking with pressure in these operations. They say they're not going to. So really, around fracking and regular drilling, it's the same issues. It's just with the large-scale fracking, it's just more water, more chemicals, just more of everything. But when you're talking about a specific site, you're still going to have the trucks coming in and out. You're still going to have all the chemicals coming in and out. You're still going to have the oil coming in and out, people coming in to check it every day. So a lot of the things that are surround fracking are also around any kind of conventional drilling. This is what you do very deep underground with either kind of fracking, really. This one here is the high-pressure fracking. They actually blow holes in the pipe underground and then push extremely heavy pressure of water and chemicals and sand into those areas to open up the fracking, open up the pores in the rock. Really the same thing they're doing with acidizing, which is something I'll talk about in a minute. These are some of the chemicals used in fracking, and also many of these are used in conventional fracking, the shallower fracking, and just plain drilling. The acidization is the bottom thing. We'll talk about that in just a second. The acids are used to break up the rock. Acidization. I was asked to talk about this because this was in the permit, and a whole bunch of people were very concerned about it, so I did some research, and I added some slides to my presentation. Basically, it's to loosen up, to melt away rock, to get out of the way so all this oil and gas can come into the pipes and be taken out and sold. So they dissolve the rocking using hydrochloric acid or hydrofluoric acid, depending on what kind of rock you're looking at. For many, many years, hydrochloric acid has been used in cleaning the pipes that they use to drill for. Much more recently, that's been used to actually break up the rock itself around these pipes. There's matrix fracking and there's fracture acidizing. The matrix acidizing is they just put in the acid into the system through the pipes and they just push it in at normal pressure for that set of rocks. The fracture acidizing is put in much heavier pressure. So it's actually the pressure also breaks the rocks and the acid eats the rocks up, and so it allows the oil and gas to flow. The hydrochloric acid is mostly used for carbonate rock, which is mostly what's going to be here down in Southfield. And the hydrofluoric acid is used more in sandstone. There's a lot of sandstone in Michigan, not in this area right here, but in other areas of Michigan, even to the little bit in the top of Oakland County, there's large sandstone formations underground that could be used. They could use hydrofluoric acid for. These are highly powerful acids, and if they're used too strongly, they can actually break down the pipe that you're trying to use. So they have to be very careful with them. The National Fire Protection Association calls hydrofluoric acid one of the most dangerous classes of industrial chemicals there are. Just in Texas, in many refineries, there's 50 refineries that use hydrofluoric acid in their refining to make high-test gasoline. And there's been a significant number of accidents. The United Steelworkers did a study, and they showed that 36 out of those 50 refineries that use this have had serious accidents and near fatal accidents for many years. So there's a lot of concern about how people are handling these fluids. The average well can use anywhere from 10 to 500 gallons of this mixture per linear foot that they're trying to break up for the rocks. The far left one is acid dissolving. This is when they put the acid down just to clean the pipes because of the corrosion that can happen inside pipes. Clean them all out. Really, it doesn't do much. The acid stimulation, that's the matrix acid, is just pushes it in. It goes into the looser forms of rocks, significant amount from the piping, and then as it eats the rocks, it becomes inert. It's not acidic anymore. And then there's the fractured acid, where they're putting it in under intense pressure, so it does both, eats the rock and breaks it up. So there is a significant amount that's used with pressure. Again, hydrofluoric acid is extremely dangerous stuff. It boils at 67.1 degrees, a spring day, it boils. It can produce a dense cloud of fumes that can travel a significant amount of space and still harm people. Even small doses inhaled, or if you get a patch on your skin that's up to, even down to 5 by 5 inches in contamination in your skin, it can kill you. And it won't affect you right away. It goes in through your blood, and it can kill you. It can destroy your heart. A few years ago in South Korea, there was an 8-ton release. There's video of it where these two guys were working on a tank car and a train, and it blew the seal and killed them instantly, killed a couple of people near them. 3,000 people in a nearby village had to be taken to the hospital and treated. So this can have a significant effect if something like this were to get out. My understanding is here we shouldn't worry about hydrofluoric acid. It's not as intense. Hydrochloric acid would be what they would use for here, which is in itself extremely powerful chemical. Generally speaking, they mix it on site. So they'll bring in a tractor trailer of acid that they will mix with water on site to inject. This is from the, these are the links. I always try to have links in here that aren't directly from a blog or anything, but actual fact links. So these are all very, all my links should be very good. One of the things that was done by the state early on when fracking became a real issue, they did a study at the Graham Sustainability Institute at U of M, and they talked about the potential risks of fracking and all oil drilling. Again, this study showed that it's just a matter of degree. When you're having these sites, you're always going to have the potential for a hazard, for a problem to happen. Often the wastewater is contaminated with heavy metals. For the deeper fracking, you can come up with radioactive isotopes. The compaction of the land around it changes the hydrology of the land. It'll change the way water flows off it. It can change the course of streams. Hydrological connectivity. If there's a leak underground in a significant depth of a drill rig, if it leaks through the rig somehow and gets into the rock formations, it can come up through these rock formations, and it can come up miles away from where the actual drilling happened. So these things can come up in a place that you wouldn't even necessarily associate with a drilling operation. You've got to be careful of that. That's something they pointed out. And the bottom one here, this report and a later report they did points out that there's almost no data in Michigan on the effects on the aquifer. I've heard the gentleman from the Petroleum Institute, I've heard the head of the Oil, Gas, and Minerals say there's no evidence of drilling in Michigan historically affecting the water table or affecting the aquifer. Well, when they say there's no evidence of that, what they're saying is there's no evidence. Because until very recently, nobody drilled pre-exploration holes to test well, to see what the makeup of your water is already before you've drilled. That was just never done. And only in recent years has it become fairly common to do post-drilling testing of the water to see what the conditions are. But I can tell you, people who have taken them to the oil companies to court to fight contamination of their groundwater have been told, well, those chemicals are already there. Wasn't us. So if you don't do pre-drill testing to get water quality around well sites or around where the actual well is going to end up being extracting, then you're not going to be able to say long-term what the effects were from that. So when they say there's no evidence of that, there's no evidence at all. And if you don't have evidence, you can't make claims that there's no evidence of something. So to me, it just doesn't make sense. Historically, the vast majority of oil drilling, even outside of Michigan, but especially in Michigan, has been in highly unpopulated areas. We just historically have never done it in densely populated areas. If you look at the map of Michigan, the first knuckle is where the vast majority of oil wells have always happened in this state. They've been spread around the rest of the state, but the vast majority have been in places where there's no human contact, people don't live for miles around, so there's been no need to really study the effects of local access to oil. So when you're doing it in the middle of densely populated areas, I think that's the most important thing we have to protect against. So when you're doing it here on church property, surrounded by subdivisions, it's just, to me, that's a huge mistake. They used to say in the lottery that, if you don't play, you can't win. Well, in this situation, if you don't play, you can't lose. Even if all these wells are perfect and they've never leaked through the system of deep underground, there's spills, there's accidents, there's overflows, there's all kinds of things can happen. Several years ago in 2011 in Pennsylvania, there was an oil spill where it was a fracking well, but the well blew, the casing blew, and it blew a 25-foot column of water that was 2 feet across into the air for about, I think it was like a day before they could finally get it closed off. If that happened next to one of our rivers, one of our streams, it could be devastating. It could absolutely be devastating. There's been a lot of studies on the effects of fracking and of all, again, these are slides on fracking, but everything that has to do with this, there's always a potential for issues. There was a story out of the University of Missouri that they went to Colorado, and they tested the groundwater and the surface water in counties that had heavy drilling and counties that had no drilling. The counties that had heavy drilling, they found significant above average levels of a lot of the chemicals that are involved with drilling. In the counties that had very little drilling or no drilling, they found almost none. They found the general background of those kind of chemicals. So this has shown that where there's these kind of operations, there often are these kind of problems. Hydraulic fracking fluid fell into a stream, spilled into a stream in Kentucky, and it wiped out all the fish all the way down to that next river that it hit. They found all through their gills were heavy metals. So these are things that can come up through this spilling, and it was a 300-gallon spill. The author of the study said, this study is a precautionary tale how entire populations can be put at risk with even small-scale fluid spills. This can happen. We're human. We make mistakes. Even if we have the best intentions, the best plans, best laid plans of mice and men, fall apart. There's the National Academy of Sciences, the American Academy of Pediatrics. They point out that basically every time you have a gas or oil infrastructure, it leaks fumes. They all leak fumes. If you do studies, you can see, well, you'll see in another map here in New York City, they showed a place where they just drove around the roads and kept getting these readings of the failing system. So when VOCs are released, volatile organic compounds, that's the methane, that's the chemicals that come up with the methane, when that mixes with car exhaust, it creates ground level ozone. Ground level ozone is something that there's federal rules you have to protect against. The Southeast Michigan Council of Governments has a program every summer to educate people about VOCs, about ground level ozone. You shouldn't pump gas in the middle of a day when there's no wind because it can mix with the exhaust and cause that. Well, these are 24-hour, 7-day-a-week leaks of methane. They just leak all the time. If you can take pictures, there's certain kind of cameras you can use that can see the fumes coming off these things. And again, there's another case that's out in California. You've heard about the giant gas leak that's putting out the equivalent of greenhouse gases of 160 coal-fired power plants in one leak of gas. The United States EPA says that methane contamination was detected in private wells after drilling that were much higher than they were beforehand. So these kind of things do happen. They found it over and over again. Again, chemicals found in produced water contain metals, radionucleotides, all those things. There was the bottom one here is a Greene County in outside Pittsburgh, year before last, or almost 3 years now. A station that took the gas from local wells, and then the trucks would fill from that station, exploded. It vaporized the person that was standing there. It burned. They said they could hear the explosion miles away. There was a huge flame coming off it. They had to bring in a crew from Texas to put out the fire because local firemen, they can't put out those kind of fires. So it took them a significant amount of time. The oil company ended up giving them a bunch of pizzas. So I don't know what that did, but so these kind of things happen. Again, we're human beings. We have accidents. We do stupid things. We don't pay attention to the rules we should be. Just things happen that you got to be aware of. And when you're doing this near a residential area, it can happen to you. I'm not going to say anything will happen. The point of this is the more wells you have, the more likely you are to have an accident. It's just like that. If you don't play, you can't lose. Oil and gas industry is a large source of VOCs. Again, this is the U.S. Health and Human Services Toxic Substances Registry. Colorado became the first state to regulate all methane leaks from the well through the chain, through the whole supply chain. They said when they announced that they would do that, if they could eliminate all the leaks, just the leaks in the system, it would be the equivalent of taking every single vehicle off their roads. This system leaks at an amazing rate. The Halliburton loophole was the loophole that said the EPA cannot regulate these issues. They're still supposed to live under the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Clean Drinking Water Act, but the EPA can't enforce them. It has to be enforced by the states. In Michigan, it's almost entirely enforced by the states. Local governments have very little wiggle room to regulate this, the actual drilling operations. There's other ways we can regulate. And again, this fracking is a very good source. It gives key impacts of specific people that have been impacted by drilling. The fracking water, the water process, these aren't going to be large-scale water withdrawals. These are mostly, let me see here, flaring and associated natural gas. They talked about flaring, I think, in the permit. Flaring is where they don't have enough gas to deal with in terms of buying or getting enough profit from, so they just burn it off on site. It's a huge flame comes out of their pipe. It makes a lot of noise. It doesn't necessarily completely burn the methane. Some of that methane still comes off as methane. So that's another thing that can be a significant irritant if you live nearby that. Wastewater disposal, everything still has to get disposed of. They still end up injecting this into deep injection storage wells that have been triggered earthquakes in Kentucky. They went from 1 to 2 earthquakes over 3 on the Richter scale a year to that many a day. They had one that was 4.4 a month or so ago. They've had significant earthquakes, and their Geology Department and the U.S. Geological Survey have both said directly linked to injection wells of these kind of liquids. Again, this is another study of the loss of methane through the system. Again, in the first 20 years, methane is 84 times as heat trapping as carbon. It breaks down faster, so in 100 years is about 25 times as strong a heat trapping element as carbon. So we are pushing this stuff out in a lot of ways. Again, the oil company claimed that there's no contamination in Michigan. There's never been baseline testing. Just recently, and only for the large-scale fracking, the state has changed the rules to make you have to have pre- and post-drill testing of the water. That's great, but I think it should be any drilling. And any community that allows this should do pre- and post-testing or have them do it, because that should be part of what they do to make sure that they're not going to pollute anything. And again, sustainability, to me, sustainability is the most important thing a government can do. We have to look ahead to what our decisions are going to have an impact down the road. The American Indians had 7 generations you should look ahead. That's a little steep, but I'd say at least 20 or 30 years to look ahead to see what this means. And to me, oil and gas and coal and all these fossil fuels are not sustainable. We can't keep using these things. I'll talk about it in a minute, but this long term, we've got to get off this stuff. It's killing us in so many ways. This is a study that was released a year and a half ago from Pennsylvania. Again, they've been saying, there's no cases of drilling or fracking affecting water tables. Well, this is 243 cases, specific cases where water, mostly fracking, but other conventional wells have impacted nearby water wells and nearby aquifers. Of those 243 cases, a bunch of them are multiple cases. 15, 20, 30 wells have been affected by one oil well. So these things have happened. They've been shown to happen. Not as much here because we haven't, frankly, done it as much here. Pennsylvania's been ankle deep in it for years, and so has Colorado and some of these other states. It's just starting in Michigan. Again, the large-scale fracking, I don't think Michigan needs to do. It's too dangerous. It uses too much water. But oil drilling, regular oil drilling, it's not something we can just step away from right away. We've got to allow drilling. But to me, again, residential is not the way to go. This city has significant industrial areas. We could do it in industrial areas and go diagonally. I mean, that's the way to go. We don't want to be doing it in places that endanger people. My favorite one, this is a Wall Street Journal article. The CEO of Exxon goes around the country telling everybody there's no problem with fracking. Everybody's just making a big deal out of nothing. Well, he sued to stop a fracking operation from his house. A couple of miles from his house. He said all the things we say. There's about traffic, about the hazard, about all those things he used in that lawsuit. So when it's his house, it's a different set of rules. The U.S. Bureau of Economic Research, which is a non-governmental unit, it's paid for by a lot of industry folks. They did a study and they showed that if you live on water that's a water system like the Great Lakes Water Authority or your own city system, and you have a fracking operation nearby your house or a drilling operation, it might help your property values because you'll get a little bit of, potentially get a little bit of revenue from it. But if you're on a well, your property values can drop by 25 or 30% just from the fear that there's a potential for a problem coming into your water system. Now, in Michigan, the operations, the permitting, all those things are handled by the state, by the Department of DEQ, Department of Oil, Gas, and Minerals. But local governments do have some power. You have a power around the sources of water that you're getting, the sweetening facilities, flow lines, things like that. The chemical mixing stations, you can demand that they be done in a certain place, that you can limit to where that's done. Air emission equipment, flares, scrubbers, those kind of things, you have a power to do that. This is the court decision that goes from that. Flow for Water is a really great organization. They help local governments deal with fracking and with oil drilling as a rule. Very good. They have very good resource. You can regulate pipelines. The pipelines that come from the drill to the first stage of storage, those you can regulate. After that, it comes into the state and federal government's purview, and you have no rules over that. But there is some you can do in terms of the pipelines. Again, all these other things you can do around the transportation plan, all the emergency planning. In case there's a sour well, you gotta have an evacuation plan. There's a lot of things that you can do around that. But I will give you a cautionary tale. I'm from Farmington Hills. Back in 2001, I'm not sure if it was East Bay or Jordan, came to the city wanting to do a bunch of drilling along 275 right on the edge of a subdivision. The city asked for a bunch of information. They really wouldn't give much information. They wouldn't respond to their requests. So they finally made the decision that no, we won't allow this. It's not zoned for that, and we won't allow it. Well, the company sued the city, and the city lost. They lost an $800,000 verdict. $650 was paid for by insurance, but $150 had to come from the city. They were willing to do that. It meant enough to them at that time that they could. We were in, frankly, better economic times back in 2001, so my city was able to do that. Nowadays, especially smaller communities, they just don't have the ability to stand up against that. So it takes communities to do that, stand up and make that happen, and make it a teachable moment for other communities so they can learn from it, and hopefully they'll be able to do more with it. So there is ability to do some, but you're very limited. The state government has absolute power in most of these areas. The Keystone XL pipeline was finally refused, which I think is a terrific thing. The company that wanted it is now suing the federal government about it, but we'll see where that goes. This was pitched as a safer alternative to trucks and trains. And, you know, you'd think, yeah, okay, I mean, trucks crash, trains go off, derail, so yeah, it might be more safe. That's not how it works. TransCanada's existing pipeline, in the first year on office, the first 2 years in service, had 12 times that it blew. One of them significant, 21,000 gallons. When you think about it, if a truck crashes, it's got, what, 5,000 gallon tank? 5,000 can spill. If a train spills, I think it's a 50,000 per car, something like that. They can spill 50,000. If a pipeline spills, until they stop it, till they realize it's going, it can put out millions of pounds of fuel. And that's what it did. Here in Michigan, we had the case upstate where they're still cleaning it up. It happened, It happened in 2011, and they're still cleaning it up. $2.1 billion has cost so far to clean that up. Pipelines are not a guarantee that you're going to have a safe transportation. The International Energy Agency said pipelines spill 3 times as much as truck and trains in terms of how much is driven per mile. So it happens a lot. This is a map of the U.S. The little circles are all breaks, pipeline. If you might notice down in Texas, they have a significant number of them down there. There's areas in Houston I've seen that are pretty much just desolate deserts that nothing grows in. And $4.5 million over gallons in 200 spills. So this happens a lot more than you think it does. There was a case back in the 90s where a hunter put a 30-30 hole in the Alaska pipeline, and they found about 30,000 gallons when they finally realized it was there. It's a significant amount can be spilled from these things before they even know it happened. We happen to have a significant pipeline underneath the Mackinac Bridge that is a huge threat, and the line that feeds that goes across the UP is even older, and that goes across a bunch of streams. So there's huge potential. And again, all these things that come out of whatever you're going to drill here, they come out of pipes as a rule. So there's always that chance. This is the Porter Ranch gas leak. This is what I was telling you about. 89,000, over 80, probably over 90,000 now. It's leaking at about 100,000 tons. I'm sorry, 1,000 tons a day it's leaking. And this is just one. There was an article, here, no, that's not it. There was an article, matter of fact, the bottom one, this NBC Los Angeles article has a significant piece about, this is about 160 coal-fired power plants worth of greenhouse gases coming out of this one place here. But nationwide, all the leaks in the system, they're estimating is 7.1 million tons of methane leaks out every year from our system. Again, it's had, in the first 20 years, had 84 times the heat trapping potential. 3,000 homes have been evacuated nearby. California gas leak is just one of thousands across the country. The Stanford University study shows that the EPA is underestimating by at least 50% the amount of methane leaks, and other studies have shown even more. This is a map of Staten Island. They just drove down the streets with a detector and found these leaks. The red one in the middle there, kind of off center there, is a huge one. This is old infrastructure, significantly old infrastructure. You might recall a few years ago a house blew up in Royal Oak because they were working on a pipeline nearby. This stuff is fantastic potential for accidents. They don't happen often, but when they do, they're spectacular. And of course, it can suffocate you if you happen to be caught in it. These are the stages where potential leaks happen, and everywhere from the residential, returnal, and all the way through storage, through the drilling apparatus itself, everything leaks in some way or other. So there's always that potential. Now, I've been saying this for a long time. I'm an environmentalist. We can't just be against something. We can't just say stop doing something. We have to realize that we have to start exchanging these things. T. Boone Pickens said that natural gas can be our bridge fuel to the renewable energy. Well, I just say forget the bridge. Just go to the renewable energy. We don't need a bridge. The bridge leaks, so we don't need that. We can just, my house, at my house, I refied my house. I had a terrible interest rate. I got a better interest rate. I got solar panels, and I'm still paying less on my interest rate. So I'm producing my own energy. I've eliminated my house's energy. I have an electric car. I plug that into it. So I'm off the grid. I'm on the grid because I'm supplying energy, but I'm no longer producing any carbon. This is what we all need to be doing. We can do this. Our electric cars are coming down in price. Our solar energy has come down 60% just since 2001. I'm sorry, 2010. Michigan is now fourth in the number of green jobs in green alternative energy. We have the potential for really breaking out. The governor says he supports it, though he doesn't support the state push to actually get it done. He just thinks it should be done. Well, I think it should be done, but we should do something to get us moving in the right direction. In Farmington Hills, we installed a geothermal heating system and solar panels on our new city hall and eliminated $30,000 worth of energy, of gas we use every year, natural gas. I have a wastewater treatment plant in Commerce that we've changed. We put equipment in to pull the heat out of our sewage that we're treating. So now we've eliminated a $50,000 a year natural gas bill from that building. This potential is huge. Nationally, we've added 855 megawatts of wind just in a couple of years ago, and it's increased every year since. We are expected to put out twice that this year. This country has really turned a corner in recognizing the importance of alternative energy sources. It's going to be the future. our kids are going to say, what took you so long? Okay, this is, the LEED certification is growing. Our city hall is LEED certified gold. It replaced a horribly useless building that was leaking energy just terribly. And so this building is almost twice as big, but it uses 70% less energy than the old one. The potential is there. This city can do it. Every city can do these things. So that's pretty much my presentation. If we're open for questions here. Do we have somebody that has written? Sure, he's.
And we have staff around that will collect some of the cards. I do want to make an additional announcement that we're joined by Oakland County Commissioner Janet Jackson in the back here, and my colleague from the City of Flint, State Representative Sheldon Neely, has joined us in the back there. So, our city attorney, we've had a lot of questions that have very similar veins to them. So I'm going to read a few of them in joint together, but I will identify who asked the question. So if you want to expand upon your question, we will give you that opportunity. Most of these are probably for our city attorney. Michael Reed asks, whom and at what political level has the final legal say as to whether oil and gas drilling can proceed in Southfield? Lorraine Jelenik asks, how and who do we contact at the MDEQ and the state government to express our concern? So we'll loop those questions together. I think our city attorney can talk a little bit about, what does the city's moratorium mean? What legal implications does it have? How is the state abiding by it? And then to answer the second question about contacting the MDEQ, that's what the public hearing is for on the 17th. So that's when we will have the opportunity to speak specifically to the MDEQ. But we're on TV, so we got to talk through the mic. So if you want to answer the question specifically about process, our moratorium, what legal impact does it have, and why is this in the middle of this fight?
So the statute gives the MDEQ authority over the actual drilling operations, and so they're proceeding along their statutory authority, but of course the city has local police power and local zoning authority, and so we're proceeding on those paths. Some of the police powers issues would be the noise, the dust, the pollution. In the zoning, that's a residentially zoned district, and our planner can talk about this as well. Not only is the moratorium in effect, but it's a residentially zoned district, and we would not allow drilling operations. That's not a permitted use within that district. So obviously the council during the moratorium will consider an ordinance, and hopefully through our zoning power we'll establish the appropriate district for the drilling if anyone wanted to undertake it, but it certainly wouldn't be within residential districts.
So Robin Westlau, asks, if the moratorium ends in April, can we continue with it? Farmington Hills City Charter Amendment is to protect not just the surface of the parkland, but the entire property, including subsurface. Don't take my water for greed. I don't trust DEQ. Don't Democrats have a bill in Lansing to stop this, stop selling public land? So I think that it was addressed a little bit with the specific questions. Yeah, do you want to expand? Go ahead.
Well, that was a different situation because it was the citizens against, the city took an opposite position in that case. Well, during the moratorium, obviously, it's our position that no drilling can occur. And during that period, that's the whole intent for us to take to city council an ordinance that, again, with the planner here, we can talk about that, but our considered opinion would be it is not appropriate to allow drilling in a residential district. So that would be our zoning authority, which we maintain we still have a right. I don't care what the state has, the city has a local zoning power, and we intend to pursue that, absolutely.
Okay, great. Two more questions that I'm going to loop together, and I think our commissioner can answer. One is from Barbara Smith. Are there already oil wells in Oakland County? How many? Where are they? What are the requirements for protecting the wetlands? And Wanda Staton asks, has Jordan development been permitted to drill in other residential areas? What, if any, has the impact and housing values been long-term? So can you talk a little bit about past oil wells near and around Oakland County? I think that addresses these two questions. And if you want to, if I read off your name and you want to expand, we can recognize you.
There are some in Oakland County. There's some in Wayne County. The older ones were not in the very high populated areas. There's a couple in, it's the park out on 696, the Metro Park. Kensington. I think they were looking to put one in at Indian Springs. There's one over at in Troy. There's a couple, but again, most of them are not in residential areas. A couple in the parks are in very large parks, so they're not near any residences at all. I'm not crazy about having them in parks, but most of them, the vast majority, again, historically have always been not anywhere near residential areas. I mean, there were a few on the southwestern corner of the county, starting in the 20s and up through the 50s, but again, they were very dense, lightly populated areas. I'm sorry, was it, what else?
Yeah, was that one of those your questions? Go forward, yeah.
Right, you'll see just a pipe coming up out of the ground with some equipment on it. They're very small once they've been drilled and set in place. They're the actual. Some of them are are still producing. The ones in the metro parks are still producing. Again, I couldn't tell you the exact place where all of them are in Oakland County.
A few other questions from Pamela Gerald. The park across the street is owned by the city. It consists of 3 parcels. Does the city own the mineral rights? Does Word of Faith own the mineral rights? Has the city tried to buy the mineral rights before Jordan came to town? And does the city own the mineral rights? Do you have any response to that, our attorney, Ward?
I can't speak on whether Word of Faith owns its mineral rights. I'm assuming that it does. When it bought the property, unless the mineral rights were excluded, it probably owns them. But I really don't have any independent knowledge. The park across the street, the city acquired from the state, and what the state typically does is say, if anybody ever mines on that park property that's now owned by the city, the state has a right to a percentage of the profits, the royalties derived by the mining. So if council were to determine we want to harvest some of those oil gas on under Bowervick Woods, the state may have a claim to a portion of those. So that's the best answer I can give you. Right now, council certainly hasn't indicated any indication that they want to drill on the park property.
Yeah.
If I can expand on
Yes.
this question, 9 Mile Road is
City, I think 9 Mile, yeah, is.
so now they're going to be doing directional boring, which is the actual. A little different than hydraulic. When they go down, are they going to
I don't think. I think that's an excellent question for the DEQ. We don't know at this juncture. Their actual drill will go in on Word of Faith property. They have shown on the permit application precisely where the drill would go on Word of Faith property. Where it's going directionally, I don't know that. So it is possible that it's directionally going somewhere else. That's possible.
How many people in here listen? Stop your stand up.
Okay. We have several more questions that I want to get to. Thank you. No, we have several more questions that we want to get to. We have cards that are being passed around. Yep. If you submitted a card, I read it. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes, sir. Sure. On the permit application, it does state that the state does not have to specifically support its decision based on local ordinances or local laws. The legislation that I've introduced codifies that, yes, the state must adhere to all applicable local laws. So this permit that is before the DEQ does not have to abide by our local ordinance, but we are also a home rule state, which states that our local ordinances are what governs our local communities, and that includes zoning ordinances. So to go on to our, not to take the words out of our city attorney, if the application is approved, the city will contend under home rule that our zoning ordinances are constitutionally enshrined, and therefore it has to adhere first to the city moratorium. Am I correct on that? The person who, the people who submit the application, could has their own set of legal options as well, which I can't speak of. So we're going to continue on. I'm going to try to get to everyone's questions. So if you submitted a card, just know that it's in the pile here, and we're doing our best. Joshua Faber has 2 questions. I think one was answered. Is there any financial benefit to the city, or is it solely to the church? The city isn't pursuing any of these options to drill, so wouldn't receive any financial benefit. Is that correct? And then, why is the DEQ in favor, and what benefit do they get? So the DEQ is making the final decision after the public hearing on February 17th. They have not indicated a position one way or another, so they are not in favor, they are not opposed, but they are the authority that gets to determine the fate of the application. So they have not made a determination yet one way or another. Yeah, Joshua. So there's a certain amount of criteria that has to be met for this application, but I think that they are going to take in consideration the comments that are made at the public hearing. Not to get into a political statement, but there's a lot going on with the DEQ right now. And, Sheldon knows it more than anybody else probably in the room. And so because of that heightened sensitivity, that's why my office got a call that they did want to hold a public hearing. And so there is a lot of pressure on the DEQ to go by their rules and procedures, but also, given what's going on elsewhere in our state, take in the consideration of the community itself. And I would say that the city council's moratorium, the statements from the mayor are going to be weighed heavily in this decision because of what has previously happened around the state. So I want to get into some not specific to this application, but we'll go back to some of those. So Bern Schwartz asks, and this is for our commissioner, what happens to the wastewater? How do they prevent it from entering the Rouge tributary? If they contaminate my well water, can I sue them? So I guess it's a little bit of both. What happens, and then I think our city attorney can talk about legal recourse should something go wrong. Want to read that?
Well, it's collected and it's basically injected. Most of these chemicals, the water is so polluted that it really can't be cleaned in conventional wastewater treatment plant, anything like that. So as a rule, they're injected into the ground to deep caverns that are very supposed to be stable, and they should just accept it and keep the water. Again, this is something that's not that old, so we'll see. One of the things, and I'm not one to knock DEQ. We are regulated by the DEQ, different division, Water Resources Division, but my experience, DEQ has been the one that makes sure that the local governments are standing up and doing the right thing, and local governments kind of didn't like that sometimes, but now they're getting the reputation of just letting local governments loose and do whatever they want. So to me, that's worse. I want to be able to know that people that are regulating me are going to be hardcore on me, because I agree with them. We got to protect the environment. If they're around there just letting people get away with putting water that isn't corrosion controlled and things like that, then that's not a good sign. So to me, our relationship with the DEQ that oversees us has been very good. And I'm not going to put down state employees. I used to be one, so.
Yeah, so I'm going to continue on the technical questions. Jeremy Salinger asks, please explain the references to radioactive materials mentioned in some of the literature. What elements, what concentration? Is it injected or found in the well?
These are isotopes that are deep in the earth. If you look in the literature, you'll see that deep in the earth with the other chemicals, the pressures, the things that are injected don't necessarily come out with the same chemical formula that they had when they went in. So a lot of them do come up with radioactive isotopes. It's very common. I can't think of them off the top of my head. There's good research on that. Look it up. You can Google it. It'll come up. U.S. Geological Survey.
Okay. Oh, yeah, go for it. Yep.
These are mostly extremely deep wells that these come from. They're not going to be the very shallow wells as a rule. Absolutely. That's been the experience. Again, on my website, oakgov.com/water, if you get there, I have 3 different PowerPoints on these issues. My first one I did covers that very well.
Would you repeat your website?
oakgov.com, oakgov.com/water. And you can search on the front of that page. It'll lead you to them, fracking.
Cassandra Harris, in the drilling process, a large amount of water is used. Where does the water come from? What is done with the wastewater? And what would its impact be on Southfield's high water table? I think you addressed a little bit about the wastewater.
You know, the high water table, the biggest issue to me is spills, accidents, things that can happen and then be carried away by water. So that's, to me, the most important thing. The deep water leaks into the aquifer, much more rare. But again, since there's no testing beforehand, it's really hard to judge how much that's happened in Michigan.
Yeah, do you want to make additional comment? This is Terry Croad, our city planner.
Again, on this particular application, is our understanding that they have to clear 1.4 acres of woodland in order to just do their exploratory drilling. And part of that is, even though they drill for exploratory reasons, they need that much area for surface containment, separation for trucks, vehicles, and so forth. So not only is there the potential impact below ground, there's the impact above ground. And one of the 3 positions that we've held from the city, not only do we have a moratorium and it's not permitted by our zoning, but we also have woodlands and wetlands ordinances in place to help protect the environment, and they would also have to go through our process before even one tree is removed.
I'm going to loop 3 questions together from Thomas Anderson, Beverly Williams, and Tony Martin. In specific, Tony's question, will Word of Faith lose its tax exemption status and become a business entity?
Well, specifically, if the drilling were to occur and they're making money from that, that to me is not a religious use, and I think from that operation would clearly be taxable.
Okay, Greta Reed just submitted a card with the same question. Yes, sir. It was.
They could subdivide the property. I mean, I don't know what their plans are.
If I could just clarify, there's approximately 105 acres that Word of Faith encompasses. The parcel that they're looking at drilling is a 40-acre separate parcel of the 105. That is the minimum required acreage that the DEQ will consider drilling. So even though it's a large tract, they already have the separation, and they already meet at least that minimum threshold of 40 acres. The other thing from what the DEQ has told us is that it's the industry standard that the driller receives 5/6 of the profits. So for every 6 barrels that are recovered, they receive 5/6 of it, and the owner who leases the property receives 1/6 of it, and that's the company standard. So there's definitely an economic benefit to them.
So we should be able to get through all the cards, so just be patient. Yes.
That was an additional question on there from Thomas Anderson
Oh, yes, Thomas, go ahead.
regarding when they started drilling. In case that drills go into other property, homeowners' property, it had been known in the past to drain or from other homeowners' property, even though you're drilling there. Hey, I'd like to know the status on that.
Do you have any additional comment to that?
The only thing that we were told by by MDEQ was that, you know, when they drill down, that if there is oil there, it could go under a lot of property. The first in has the right. I mean, you can't isolate the oil and say, well, the property line stops here and stops here, so you can only take that part of the oil. It's one area of oil, and it might go under a lot of different properties. But if they're the first ones in and they access it, they actually are harvesting it. And you're right. I don't know where they're directionally going. And again, I think those are fair questions for the DEQ on the 17th. But they may well have the right to directionally bore.
We would have to know that. We would have to know that they're drilling and taking oil from our.
Well, I think that, again, those would be fair questions on the 17th, to know exactly what have they asked for. Are they going straight down? Are they going down and then over? And where, in what direction are they boring?
It has been known in the past that occurs.
Oh, I'm sure you're right.
Especially in
I'm sure you're right.
All right, continuing on with the questions that we have here. Sherry Evans Scarf, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. Do we know how many subdivisions in Southfield use well water? Do we have any idea of the radius of the impact from the fracking source?
On city water.
Yeah, we don't have an answer for that question, but if you want to stick around, I don't know if Sherry's still here. We can try and find information exactly for you on that. Yeah, Mayor Seibert, will you come to the microphone?
Neighborhood 12 and Inkster is totally on well water. Matter of fact, AbsoPure bottles the same water and sells it. We have individual wells here and there around the city. Yeah, yeah. The other thing that why it's so important, and I meant to mention this earlier, that you come on the 17th, is if this goes through at 9 in Evergreen, where will it be next? 12 in Lasher, 10 in Inkster, 9 and something else. You know. So.
All right. Our next question from Cindy Clardy. Can Southfield's numerous neighborhood associations and their overarching group representing all neighborhood groups take an official position to oppose drilling that will carry more weight with the MDEQ than individuals? I would assume that if the neighborhood association president wanted to come out on the 17th and speak for the neighborhood association, that would be acceptable. However, to make the point, I think the more individuals that show up, the better, representing the entirety of the neighborhood association. I don't know. Where's Cindy? Is that an acceptable answer? Sure. Sure. Is there another question on that specific topic in the back? Two more individuals will recognize and then continue the question. Yes, in the back. And then we'll go to you, Skip. So I'll let our city attorney weigh in on this because she knows specifically what happened in Shelby Township. To that end, I do want to acknowledge that the House bill that I introduced, I have Democratic co-sponsors and Republican co-sponsors. Two of my Republican co-sponsors who support the legislation and wanted to attach their name on it was Republican State Rep Pete Lucido from Shelby Township and Republican Representative Michael Weber from Rochester Hills. And those are two communities who have experienced what we experienced. And then, do you want to, continue on?
You answer that when I get out.
Which part? Let's see. I'm
Shelby
trying to remember.
Township.
Yeah, Shelby Township. My understanding with Shelby Township is that they did prevail and they put an exploratory drill in, but they didn't encounter enough oil to continue. So they closed up shop and went away. But there was a lot of contention between the residents that, were against it. And had they found oil, they probably would still be drilling, but they were not successful because there wasn't what they expected.
And I know that there was a woman who I was speaking with in the overflow room, who I hope is still here. We'll continue to provide that information, but she asked me the same question. What was the status of what happened in Shelby Township? City planner.
Yeah, just as far as public comment, and I've been hosting public hearings for 30 years. Typically, you can submit written form, email, whatever, up to the day of the public hearing, and I would strongly suggest that you submit your information to Hal Fitch at the DEQ. I think it carries much more weight. I believe we have about 130 active homeowner associations and organizations that you come to the public meeting with a petition in hand with as many people from your subdivision or your homeowners association and officially hand that in at the public hearing. When we hold public hearings, we take all of that into consideration, and your numbers and volume does play a role in how the DEQ will process public input. So I would strongly encourage, if you're a representative of a homeowners association and you can go out and canvass one way or the other, get those signatures on there and then officially present them. I believe each individual is only going to get 3 minutes.
Right.
I strongly suggest that you articulate your words on paper and read it so that you take full advantage of the 3 minutes and then officially hand in the petition to back up your statement. And that will carry a lot of weight. And you are free to email or to mail Hal Fitch's office with your concerns regarding this application. And I'm sure between the city and Representative Moss, if you don't have that information, we can provide it for you.
Yeah. I want to be mindful of everyone's time, and Skip, I'll recognize you in just a moment. We're running up on about 7:40 now. I'm just going to read the few questions. If we didn't get to your question, I'll stick around. I'm sure our presenters will stick around, but I want to be mindful. I wanted to wrap up at 7:30. We're a little over that time. Skip, I know you had an answer to the question that Cindy posed. Can you speak on the microphone? We're being televised, so we want to make sure it's...
Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, I would like to build on the comment about how important public input is, particularly at that meeting on February 17th. And prior to that, on February 10th, we're having a meeting of citizens, folks like you and I, some of us who have been out protesting on Sunday mornings at Word of Faith. I recognize many of you. We're going to have an organizational meeting of our citizens group. It's called Stop the Drilling in Southfield. We have a Facebook page, and we also have an email address that is stopthedrillinginsouthfield@gmail.com. And we're trying to reach all of the organizations, the neighborhood organizations, the community associations, PTOs, churches in the area. So we're trying to marshal a critical mass and really get the word out. So that's February 10th. It'll be at 6:30 in the Parks and Recreation building in room 221. So we've passed out these orange flyers that will give you that information. But it's coming up next week, and I invite all of you to be there. We all make a difference. I want to be seen, and I want to be heard.
I know Diana Pegler represents Southfield Homeowners Association, probably wants to make a comment on that. And then if you'll just be patient, we're going to ask 2 more questions, and then unfortunately we're going to have to wrap up. So Diana?
Good evening, everyone. Diana Pegler. I'm president of the Southfield Homeowners Association, but I'm also treasurer for the Southfield Community Coalition. And you were asking, the coalition involves condo association, homeowner association, apartment complexes. So I'm sure that we're going to be making a position statement with regard to this. But again, let's all gather together and support this cause and fight against it.
So our final 2 questions are more of the technical process questions. So we'll ask our county commissioner, our water resource commissioner, to weigh in. One is from Latifa Wooten regarding compaction. How do I know if the methane in my well is from compaction or contamination? Who can I trust to tell the truth? So I'll leave this with you to answer. And then W. Stanton asks, number 1, high pressure injection, is that fracking? Number 2, has the type of drilling that Jordan Development plans to use been implemented, implicated in the increase of earthquakes in Oklahoma, Colorado, Ohio, etc.? So these will be our final questions before we wrap up.
One of the things that I've debated against these folks on, they'll take an old ad from the 50s showing a flame coming out of a faucet and saying, you know, this is not uncommon, and it really isn't. Generally, they tend to be very brief. They don't kind of go on for a great deal of time, the natural methane exposures. But again, that the EPA study showed that there was a significant increase of transient methane in the aquifer around fracking operations. So, I mean, they said that as a statement, so I don't doubt that. I'm not sure how you can tell right off the top of my head. There might be somebody in here that could tell us, but we never know. I really couldn't answer that with any kind of certainty. Let me see. The other one is the earthquakes around this tend to be injection wells, not the actual fracking wells. That's been my understanding. All the literature I've written, it's much more with the disposal of the fluids rather than the actual operation of the fracking wells. So that's my understanding. It's not so much that, it's the just getting rid of all these poisoned water. That's pretty much my answer.
Okay, so we will wrap up. I know that there was a question about my House bill. I have literature on the table just about helpful information from my office. Email me and we'll give you more information about our House bill. Again, thank you for coming. I also was thank you Sheldon Neely, representative from Flint, for coming down and standing in solidarity with us on this. I appreciate it, and please mark your calendars again for February the 17th at the Southfield High School auditorium. Yes, ma'am. Sure. Well, yeah, so one of the questions I was asked is from Cameron Lowe, can the citizens vote on this fracking? Why not? And the woman who just approached me has petitions that deals with that in that regard. So, all right. Sorry I wasn't able to answer all the questions, but this is a good foundation of knowledge heading the 17th hearing. Thank you very much.